Sinead was talking about being at the pointy end of the rental crisis. She has to be out of her home by October. We've got this text in as well. I've just put my property up for sale. This obviously from a landlord. New rules are killing the market. Landlords no longer in control of their own properties. And Maurice Deverell is on the line. And 08187158815 if anybody else wants to get in touch. Maurice, would you agree with that texter?
I would, Kieran, thank you very much for having us on. Yes, I would, and I'd have a lot of sympathy for your previous caller. It is happening, and it is happening a phenomenal amount. Obviously, if we've 77,000 notices of termination in the last 3 months, well, that would nearly equate to 28,000 a year. We don't have the capacity for that. We have far too small a supply, and it is there's a lot of it is due to the new rules. And
are you getting out of the market?
Yeah, there's certain properties that you absolutely nearly can't leave in the market, and one type is the pre-63. So these would be the properties that would have been in Ranelagh or would be in Phibsborough or places like that, and they are old Victorian houses which would be divided into units. And those ones you cannot sell on now unless you sell them on to another landlord. And from that point of view, there aren't that many landlords buying. So it doesn't make sense to hang on to them. And I had to ask my tenants in that property to leave to get vacant possession on it.
Because at the moment you can sell that as a possible family home.
Yeah, exactly. But after March, you're not able to, because you are then considered a large landlord because you'd have four or more tenancies. And because you're a large landlord, you must sell it on to another landlord. It could never go back as a family home. And landlords will generally buy it about it. You know, they look at the yield on the building, not really the building. A family home is looked at quite differently from a selling point of view.
So once you cross that Rubicon of the new rules kicking in, the value of your asset immediately drops in a situation like that, because the potential market for resale is so small and so limited.
You are 100% correct there. We know that even looking at if you look at the RTB figures, they show that the average rent in Ireland is 17,500 a year, which would give a property a value of about 290,000 to rent it out. If you look at the CSO figures for last summer, we can see that an average house was 445,000. That's 155,000 of a drop. It's just too much, and most local Irish landlords can't weather it.
So the argument from government is that, and they don't use this language, but I when I read in between the lines, they accept. I think there would maybe be a certain period of upheaval, but in the long run, these rules will be better. Stability and certainty, I think, is what they keep saying. That's what we'll end up with: a market that guarantees stability and certainty for landlords and for tenants. Could you see us getting to that point?
Well, look, we have never had stability and certainty. There have been so many amendments to the Residential Tenancies Act since 2004. It's ridiculous. The rules keep changing all the time. So stability and certainty, we will see, Kieran. But I would be very, very surprised if we get that. Look, what is happening, and you can see it's government policy, and they're doing it very well. The local Irish landlord, they kind of want to get out of the picture. It wants to be all based on investment funds, REITs, and encouraging those type of landlords into the market. And you can even see it in the RTB statistics today. 10 years ago, there weren't such things, and now we're looking at it. And last year, the investment funds controlled 27% of the Dublin market, and this week, it's 29%. So it's all this new apartments, which are very high spec and absolutely beautiful, and concierge and everything else. But they're also they're also incredibly expensive, actually, for average Irish people to live in.
So the argument in favour of those funds was, though, that, if a Canadian teachers' pension fund ultimately owned the apartment, they'd be less interested in short-term gains, so you might get more security of tenure.
Yeah, now, I've heard that argument before, but we would know it from our members that a lot of... Landlords don't go into the business willy-nilly. I'm in it 30 years. You don't go into it for a short-term thing because you can't. You must go into it for a longer-term part. So from that point of view, it means that, yes, landlords would be selling up where the pension fund would be hanging on to it for 100 years or whatever. But in reality, it won't bring that much stability.
And what about social housing? would social, like, is there any mechanism of bringing clients? I know there's probably is now, but I'm not really familiar with it, being just a first school educator. I have no idea. But would there be anything, like, say, where landlords could sell their properties, or, you know, like, to social housing or to the local authorities to develop social housing and then upkeep certain buildings that are just left derelict? I know there's 100,000 buildings across the whole country that are left derelict. You know, just left there. Like, I pass them every day. Like,
you're right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Now, in fairness, I'm with the Irish Property Owners Association, so we don't do derelict. We are landlords who actually rent out properties. But when it comes to the social welfare, to your local authority buying the property from the landlord, from our members, I know that the delays can be absolutely horrendous, even from the legal's point of view. I know of even just one I was talking to recently with Dublin Corporation, and the solicitor in charge of conveyancing was up in Monaghan, and it took over 10 months to get the deal over the line. If you're under pressure from a bank, just to finish the point, if you're under serious pressure from a bank, and you have them writing to you all the time, and you have mortgage repayments and everything else, a 10-month delay is a serious amount of money. And it's something that is a pity, because the tenant in situ scheme could be really good from that point of view if it was speeded up and if the money was there.
Is there an element, Maurice, of robbing Peter to pay Paul when we transfer stock from the rental market to social housing? We need to increase social housing stock, but, you know, if you're diminishing the rental stock, and I just think, you know, anecdotally of my own neck of the woods in Kilkenny, just to prove this isn't just a kind of a Limerick and Dublin phenomenon. I mean, the amount of, you know, charitable housing associations that kind of gobble up low-cost housing that comes on the market, having been rental stock, is enormous, and it's great. It's security for people then who end up living in it, but God forbid you're a renter trying to get your hands on somewhere to rent.
Like, I'll give you an example as well, Kieran, and that, right? Airbnb have 1,000, like, I was looking up the difference between Airbnb and rent.ie and daft.ie, and the difference is just ridiculous. Like, as an Airbnb, the government needs to really look at Airbnb and say to themselves, this is just beyond a joke. Like, there's 1,000 houses, and the thing about it is, like, all of them are there for a night. Say, for example, you want to go away for a night, it'll cost about €200 to go away for a night. So I don't even understand why people are actually even switching to Airbnb. It makes no sense whatsoever.
I can explain that to you very easily.
Go on, Maurice.
I can explain that to you very easily. Okay, so the reason why landlords are moving to Airbnb, or some have moved to Airbnb, is that since the 1st of March, they have decided that you're either a small landlord or you're a large landlord. A small landlord being one with 3 or less tenancies, and a large landlord being one with 4 or more tenancies. If you're a small landlord with less than 3 tenancies, then you can actually get the property back on the 6th anniversary. You can get it back before that, but you have to prove bankruptcy and other things. If you're a large landlord with 4 tenancies or more, which if you take a pre-63 in 6 units or 10 units, that is 10 tenancies. That one property would make you a large landlord. Once you're a large landlord, you can never get back vacant possession on that house. So effectively, what you're doing is, when you let in that tenant after the 1st of March, you're ending up in a shared ownership, whereby the tenant you have the title of the property, but the tenant absolutely has possession for the rest of their life. And that is the thing that has really changed since the 1st of March.
And so, like, what are the solutions?
That's why they go for Airbnb, because Airbnb is not, you don't lose your house. If you let it out to a tenant after the 1st of March, you do lose your house. So that's the difference.
Now, there are the problems. We focus in on the problems, right? There are all the problems laid out there in front of us, right? What are the solutions? But what's going to bring things on the market really quickly? Like, for someone that's been in this industry for a very long time, you know, how is that going to help someone like myself or other people that are struggling to barely afford to live, like, you know, are being
absolutely. And look, supply is supply is the first thing, right? Supply has to come online, and supply has to be encouraged. And like anything else that we've done in this country, the way to do that is
it's a national emergency, encouraging something.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's not encouraged, like, it needs to actually really happen very quickly, you know.
Yeah, but we need to, there needs to be proper tax and fairness. You know, if you're an investment fund, a foreign investment fund, you pay 0% tax. I pay 52% tax on my rent. So from that point of view, the tax equity has to kick in.
Yeah, it's always about tax. But
so that's,
hear me out for a second, right? As in, we're in a national emergency. So we need solutions very quickly, and solutions are not modular homes or living in a caravan. You know, I'm 37, my housemates are 37 and 42, and we have been priced out of the housing market, and now we're being priced out of renting as well. So, like, we need, like, we're going to live, like, as in, like, there's, I hate this reductionist kind of viewpoint, and it's a viewpoint that's been held within the government. They see one thing and one thing only: investors and big profit and money, but they don't see the people on the other end of this. Like, they're going to have a whole load of people, like the likes of workers on the ground, working in cafes, you name it. Nurses, doctors, whatever, like teachers, everyone across the whole board. You know, people are working for whatever, like Mr. Binman, anyone, right? All across the whole board, the whole society is going to be affected by this. It already is being affected by this. You just mentioned about 50%. So we're in a national emergency. So what are we going to do about it? Because I'm sick and tired of I'm sorry now to say it, because I know a lot of people would agree with me, but blue shirt politicians literally ignoring the problem and just sweeping it under the rug and letting us all go to shambles. Like, I'm going to be homeless. I'm literally going to be making a nest of a forest school, you know, shelter for myself, like, in the next, 6 months, or what, October, like another 4 months. My 2 housemates are going to have to move in with their parents again at the age of 40. What are solutions, like? As in, I'm sick and tired of hearing about tax and about... I'm sick of it, like. I'm tired of listening to the huge protests that are happening, and workers are getting, you know... We're getting to a point...
I can understand you being sick and tired about it. I can understand, but look, at the end of the day, no matter what, be it flour from Ukraine when it was cut off and there was a flour shortage over here, or rental accommodation, it all comes down to supply. And you won't get supply under the present rules unless you have a serious tax incentive to do it. Now, it does, and we can see that the tax incentive works, because when you have a REIT and you're paying 0% tax, they are building most of the properties that are coming online, the new stuff. But certainly when it comes to the older stuff that was existing, yes, we have this idea that we're going to get rid of it, we're going to give it all to the funds, and that the local Irish landlord isn't going to stay in the market, and they won't. But the tax part of it is crucially important to keep existing landlords in the market and to encourage new landlords into the market.
Like, but we're focusing though on, I want solutions. I'm a person that's literally going to be evicted. You're talking to me about tax and about everything else like that. I'm not from that mindset. You're talking to a whole host of people across the whole of Ireland that are not like, all we want to do is live. Like, it's a housing crisis. It's a national emergency. I keep saying this to you to bring you back to the point of we need to focus on solutions. You know, as in,
and the other solution would be to change
as a pro-Palestinian activist. As a pro-Palestinian activist, we are all Palestinians, and we all, like, this is why we say this all of the time. It's not just people say, like, oh, I'm just talking about Palestine. I'm talking about everyone. Everyone is interconnected to this emergency, and people that are living in a housing crisis and an energy crisis and everything else. You saw with the fuel protest with the strategy of Hamas. You know. You have a whole collapse of a system. So therefore, what are the solutions that we're going to bring forward? Our government simply do have them, but they refuse to enact them. They do have a solution.
Sinead, let Maurice respond. Go on.
Sinead, just give us a sec, Sinead. Thank you. Look, another solution to this is the Residential Tenancies Act 2004, right, which is 22 years old. It's been amended probably 150 times. It is not fit for purpose for what it does. Apart from being ridiculously complicated, it also leaves us in this situation whereby if you have a property, you lose it. If you lose the rights, you must let it out for either 6 years or if you have more tenancies longer. And that is making an incredible amount of people shire. And I can understand, Sinead, where you're coming from. But in reality, when you look at money and when you look at investments and when you look at things, people look at it from a financial point of view. You go to work to get paid. You don't go to work as a charity. Landlords don't do landlording as a charity. They do it because it's an investment and they're working towards their pension on it, generally. To keep those sort of people in the market, to keep those sort of people supplying and to stop your landlord selling, which is really what you care about the most, is your landlord is selling. That sort of thing, to keep those sort of people in the market, we need changes to this Residential Tenancies Act, especially the stuff that came in March.
Well, what we need, to be honest with you, what I have a solution for you, all right? What we need is mutual aid.
Great.
We need to actually start, hold on, we need to actually start, as people, as workers, right?
Yeah.
We need to start getting away from governments, local authorities, getting away from them completely, and actually develop our own hubs, our own community hubs, away from the power sources and away from everything else. That's my solution.
All supply is good supply, so that would tie into it, Sinead. I don't mean to cut across it, but I'll tell you what, it's not the powers that be, it's the powers that be within RTE. It's my producers I'll be in trouble with if I don't take a very short break.